My name is Peter Snow, and I'm a member of the steering committee for the Out of the Cold program in Georgetown. Welcome to the fifth and final video in our series on mental health support and de-escalation. In our previous videos, we've discussed the basics of mental health support, some skills you can use to practice it, how to handle a panic attack, and managing suicidal thoughts and feelings. In this video, we're going to be talking about de-escalation. We use verbal de-escalation in our program during a potentially dangerous or threatening situation, with our goal of attempting to prevent a person from causing some kind of harm to either themselves or another person, including us. So de-escalation can be applied to many situations, in fact, not just violent aggression, but also panic, crisis, and psychosis. We're going to utilize many of the skills we've already discussed. Dr. Scott Zeller, who's a world expert on de-escalation, talks about how the best way to work with somebody who is agitated is to not be agitated back at them. And you've probably had this experience in your life where someone brings their energy up to here and you meet them there and they just go higher. We're going to be talking more about that in this video. I want you to always remember that the person you're dealing with is a person. They're a human being with thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, ideas, and they're reacting to some perceived threat. And that threat might be present, or it might be related to something in the past. And they're acting out of emotion. So you'll remember we talked about emotion earlier in this series. And I want to elaborate a bit on that in the context of de-escalation. One important thing to understand about the human brain is that when someone is very emotional, highly emotional, the rational centers of their brain quiet down. Emotion takes precedent over rational thought. And it makes sense if you really think about it. If I'm in a dangerous situation, I don't have time necessarily to think my way through it. I need to act. If I'm standing here and a bear starts running towards me, I probably don't have time to formulate a plan. I need to act. So my brain will act quickly, and it will react in some way. Now, our brains don't always pick the appropriate or right reaction, but they're doing their best. So when someone is elevated and is acting emotionally, you will notice they will often say things that don't make sense, or they will infer things that don't make sense, or they will threaten things that aren't in keeping with their normal personality. And that's because their emotions have taken over and are driving everything. They're not thinking, they're acting. That's an important foundation for what we're going to talk about today. So, when we're going to practice de-escalation, we need to be checking in on ourselves, as I've said many times in these videos, and soothe ourselves. If there's an exercise we need to do to quickly calm ourselves, we need to do that. And we need to keep checking in as we go and making sure that we're staying calm. We want to make sure that if someone is agitated or angry, we're giving them space. We don't want to get right up into their face or really close to them. We want to give them room, and we want to make sure they always have a way to leave. Because if someone is really angry or upset, we're okay if they leave. That's okay. They're allowed to go. We want to make sure they know that and that escape is there. Trapping them or making them feel trapped is only going to elevate the situation. We're going to continue to practice our validation and empathy and listening to that person and reflecting their feelings back. Validating what's valid, not validating what's invalid. And if we're going to invalidate something that's invalid, we're going to make sure we validate it a lot before we do that. And it's really important in de-escalation, because if I'm going to talk someone down out of a situation, out of an emotion, me telling them that what they're saying is wrong or implying that what they're saying is wrong is not going to help. I'm going to try to take as open and welcoming of a stance as I can. Now, some programs teach that you want to kind of have this sort of a stance where you're open to the person. You can't see my feet, but they're sort of staggered so that I can move if I need to move. You can certainly do that. We want to keep our arms down. We don't want to put them, across our chest. We don't want to put them in our pockets. And things like that, like very specific, or behind our back. And those are sort of very subtle body language clues that we want to be aware of, that we're not sending the wrong message to the person. If I put my hands in my pocket, they might think I have something in my pocket. If they're behind my back, they can't see what I'm doing. So I'm going to stay open, I'm going to stay neutral, and to keep my voice calm. We're going to talk about that in a second, and all of that. And we're going to use short, repetitive phrases. Very simple. This is a safe place. We want to help you. Tell me what you think would help things. Tell me how I can make this better. We're going to follow the principle of low and slow. We're going to keep the tone of our voice very low. We're not going to get angry. We're not going to start to talk over them. What are you doing? We're going to talk slowly. We're going to take our time and make sure our words are clear. Now, this may be hard for some of you. This is hard for me. I talk fast naturally. So learning to be low and slow is hard. And we're going to be at their level. And this one's pretty important. So if the person's sitting down, I don't want to be standing over them, domineering them. If I can get a chair and sit at their level, that's going to be ideal. Or if I can kind of come down to where they're at. Now, of course, they could be laying in a bed. That's a bit trickier, but you could also then sit next to them. We just don't want to be over top of somebody lording down at them. We also want to be below them so that they're above us, right? We want to be at that person's level. We want to meet them where they are. Now, going back to those feelings and that validation. Remember, we validate an emotion by recognizing it and acknowledging it. We want to name it so that we can tame it. It's a little catchphrase for you to help you remember that. But we want to name that feeling. We've got to figure out what it is. Remember that curiosity and figuring out what is that feeling that they're having. What is it? Because there's anger, and it might be anger, but is there something else? Are they feeling hurt in some other way? Are they feeling, anxious about something? We don't know. We got to figure that out. Our only goal number one, and really the only goal there is in any of this situation, is to regulate that person's emotion. Help them to come down from that feeling. And to keep everybody safe. We don't want to try to problem solve. We don't want to have a reflection on what they're doing or how what they're doing will affect other people. It's not the place for that. It's not the place to try and solve the world. We just want them to calm down. And of course, we're never going to say to them, you need to calm down. I just want to be clear about that. Probably should have mentioned that earlier, but we never want to say that to somebody. And you should know that it can take 20 to 30 minutes for someone to return to emotional baseline after any kind of stressful situation. It can take a while to calm down. This doesn't mean they're going to be escalated the whole time, but there's going to be a process. And we need to be aware of that. Time is our friend. Okay, so that's your foundation. What do we do if we actually have someone who's agitated or upset? We're going to have one person take the lead to communicate with that person. We don't want to gang up on them. We don't want it to feel like they're being, attacked from multiple directions. We want one person to communicate. The other volunteers are going to be giving space. They're going to be attending to the other guests, making sure they're okay. Contacting, if we need to contact emergency help, they're going to be doing that. All those kinds of things. We're going to encourage the other guests to stay out of it. And experience teaches us that they won't necessarily do that. Many of them will try to get involved and try to be engaged in it, and we want to discourage that. We want to encourage them to stay away, let us handle it, let us figure it out. Now, in a situation where there's two guests involved, and that does happen, we want to make sure that we have two volunteers, trying to de-escalate each person and trying to solve that problem. And it is also okay, and we'll talk about this again, to ask people to leave. We'll get there. And we want to make sure that what we're doing is we're keeping an eye on how we're feeling, what we're experiencing, so that, we can stay calm and stay involved. And we may at some point need to check the tag out, and that may happen, and that's okay. So remember, we want to be low and slow, calm. We want to give them space and a way out. We're going to be empathetic. We're going to use simple words, simple phrases, give them as many options as we can so they have choice. We're going to take our time. We're not going to rush it. And we can ask them to leave. And at the end of the day, we can say, you need to go. And that's okay. We do that. It happens. And that's the reality of our situation. None of us want to send someone out into the street, particularly on a cold night. But the reality is we have to think about the well-being of everyone who stays with us and how we can keep our space safe for everyone. Afterwards, we want to debrief. Ideally, the volunteers should talk with each other, discuss what happened, their feelings, how they're dealing with it. And then we're going to want to also debrief with someone from our steering committee, our staff, through that process. And we also want to support the other guests that are there at the time if they need anything, listening or whatever. And then ideally someone will have a chance to debrief with the guests at some point in the future to deal with it. That doesn't have to be you. But certainly that's an important step if we can do it. All right. So here's what you need to remember as additional considerations for this situation. We're here to provide a safe environment for our guests. That's job one. So by practicing empathy and maintaining a calm atmosphere, we can actually prevent some issues before they arise. And we generally do well with this. We don't have that many issues. They do happen, but generally speaking, we're able to manage them pretty well. We're going to work with our other volunteers. We're going to build our relationships with them. We're going to support each other. That's super important. Bedrock of our program. And don't be afraid to say to someone, I don't know about that or how to deal with that, but I'm going to go find out. Don't make decisions and choices just because somebody wants something because that makes you feel better or makes them feel better. If you don't know something, you don't know. Go figure it out. We've dealt with a lot of things in this program. We have policies, we have plans, we have ways we handle situations. It's okay to ask someone who knows more than you how to deal with something. And don't expect that you're going to do this perfectly or that you're going to know everything or that you're going to watch these videos and you're going to go off and you're going to perfectly de-escalate a situation. That's unlikely. Even people who know how to do de-escalation and are really good at it still mess up. Some situations just can't be de-escalated in the moment. And that is why we have emergency services. So there may come times when we need to communicate with them, and we generally have a pretty good relationship with the local police. So your primary goal is to keep everyone safe. Your focus is on helping the guests to regulate their emotions. You're going to remain calm and communicate clearly, and you're going to rely on your other volunteers and any outside support you need to de-escalate that situation and keep everybody safe. This is the end of our de-escalation video, and it's also the end of this series of videos. And as with all of the others, if you have further questions, you can contact Reverend Booz or myself, and we'll be happy to talk with you about any of these topics. I also highly recommend that you consider taking an additional training in this area, whether that's mental health first aid, assist, or some other program that will help you learn more about handling these kinds of circumstances and situations, make you feel more confident when you're working on our program, and also generally just spread awareness of these things in our community. Certainly they're useful at the Out of the Cold program. They're also very useful in many other parts of our day-to-day lives. Well, thank you for taking the time to go through all of these videos and to learn about our program, and thank you for volunteering. The Out of the Cold program only works because of the generous time donated by our volunteers and all the work you do to help support our guests. Our program keeps growing, the need is clearly there, and we thank you so much for being here. Take care.